Alright, MA Marignon, turn 64. This will be a review style episode. So I already kind of know what's going to happen, though I'm not going to remember a lot of the skirmishes. I believe we're in the middle of our war with Falegra. Kind of an important turn by the look of it. We get attacked in Nazca and then we attempt to storm. I'm sure all that went fine. Bringing in another Lamia Queen, talked before, I think these are really good mages. Also useful that we're full heat scales, because they are cold-blooded. Shifting some mages around, trying to do a little bit of blood site searching remotely. This is mostly going to be useful for much later in the game. There aren't actually very many blood sites, but the ones that are out there tend to offer significant discounts, which is a pretty big deal. Using our werewolf cannon, though it looks like I think we're using it on our own territory. If I recall, we have not had great success taking other people's provinces with that. And then it looks like we catch a battle, probably a magic phase battle between Ulm. Okay, they're throwing some birds at Asphodel. This is possibly one of Asphodel's forts, because it kind of looks like they're national province defense, and the bird spell not great, but Asphodel's province defense also not fantastic. Yeah, it looks like the birds managed to snipe at least one of the commanders, maybe both of the commanders. Yeah, Asphodel's routed. So 10 air gems. Yeah, we talk about this spell actually comes up a lot. A lot of people really don't like it, but it can work, and that is one of the cases where that works. So it looks like all managed to lock down one of Asphodel's forts. Do a fair amount of manual site searching, most of which doesn't work out. Though we do find an animal cemetery somewhere. I think we can use this to summon in units, though the units that you summon in aren't great. And actually we found another site. Both of these are death sites. I believe this gives us a death gem. I don't know if the animal cemetery does, but increasing our death income would be really nice as we start to head into the late game here. Still doing a very light amount of blood hunting. And on to the battles. So it looks like Falegra sallies out with something. Yeah. Wailing Winds. Is this from Falegra? Oh, wait, no, right. This is from our Gullum, who has the Horror Harmonica. This could be bad. Because, let's see, where is he? Yeah, here he is. He's going to be summoning some horrors. So the Wailing Winds is fine from the Harmonica. And this triggers gem usage, so hopefully we have 2 helpings of gems, although, yeah, Wailing Winds actually works out for us pretty effectively. It looks like the majority of Falegra's stuff routes. The Tyrants we got kind of lucky on. They have decent morale, and once they take damage, they're berserkers. So, these guys might have hung around, but they got some bad rolls. At least one of them did. Looks like we managed to steal one of the Gigante warriors. Not that surprising that the Axe Warriors run. This is definitely a downside for Falegra. A lot of their stuff has pretty low morale, but they do still have, one of their twice-born white mages, who is also their prophet, and being undead, much higher morale. Fairly light kitting, though, so, we'll see what kind of magic resistance. Magic resistance 20, definitely respectable, but hopefully we'll be able to get off a Soul Slay. Yeah, we are throwing out some Soul Slays, or, yeah, and here come the horrors. They are technically on our side, I guess. Interesting. Are they not fighting us? Oh, maybe we mind controlled it. Yeah, we mind controlled a horror. Not really sure how that works, but we are fighting some horrors elsewhere. So yeah, our knights are in. Soul Vortex, definitely a problem. Our knights will get soul drained, dealing a decent amount of damage. It does look like a Paralyze at least got off on this white mage. But this is, yeah, we have a lot of retreats. Let's see, probably because we were fighting, it looks like we got it. There was a horror over here. A lot of horrors have fear built in. Probably a lot of our knights are getting diseased too. This Gortide has like this, disease aura. And yeah, magic resistance, not our best thing. And it looks like, we're moving in the right direction, but this isn't going great. Let's see, what do we have? Darkness? No, Solar Eclipse. Right, Wailing Winds. So, we'll see. This is looking fairly painful, though. Hopefully this is the majority of what Falegra had in Nazca, because our assaults, yeah, we do eventually get him. Our assault force is going to be significantly reduced and possibly gemless. So we do manage to kill, some Healet Axe Warriors, not a big deal. Getting rid of the White Mage is probably the most important thing. The Tyrants do manage to retreat off, which is pretty significant. And then we lose 13 Flagellants, only 5 Knights, though again, probably a decent number of those Knights, that lived are now diseased. And also we have, 12 retreats, most of whom survive. But yeah, I think we dodged a bullet there, right? The fact that we were able to mind control that Gortide horror, which does not look like it sticks around, is pretty significant because I think that could have caused us a lot of problem and kind of highlights like trying to make the handoff to the Horror Harmonica Golem. You need the army to crack the walls, and then you want the Golem to come into storm. But if the enemy comes out of the fortress, then that's a big problem. And you can't move you need to leave some siege strength on there to keep the walls cracked. So you can't just move the army off as you move the Golem on. So in retrospect, using the Horror Harmonica Golem to storm forts is not my favorite tactic. It certainly can be effective, but it also can be dangerous. Then we catch a battle between Asphodel and Man. Let's take a look. Probably, okay, this probably just retreating, it looks like, a few commanders. Pretty massive force from Man here. And a pretty large communion too, though the nice thing, at least for their national mages, is that they just drop out of communions rather than burning themselves out and killing themselves with fatigue. So definitely glad that is aimed at Asphodel and not at us. Then we have an attack, probably a raid. Nope, one of our armies moving out. I think we actually combined armies, if I recall. We don't really have much of a front line, and there isn't too much of a defense here. Decent amount of province defense, but not going to be able to stop all this. Looking back on this, probably a little knight heavy for the armies. But, you do want a lot of Knights of the Chalice as Marignon. But definitely struggled all game long to have anything of a front line that wasn't Knights. Still, it works out for us here. We do manage to lose a Flagellant. Somewhat hard to avoid. Let's see, we witnessed Shinoyama attacking probably a throne? No, just some random Vineman province. Let's see what they're doing. Looks like probably maybe just fire elementals. A lot of people really like to thug out these Bakemono sorcerers. They're old, although interestingly this guy isn't, but I've heard that they have old age problems, but they are very powerful mages. So pretty useful all around, whether you're thugging them or using them as casters, and indeed fire elemental. And I have faith that they'll take out the Vinemen. They do, no losses. And then we have Yis probably assaulting Pelagia, maybe just jumping on top of one of their forts, So yeah, this is the Yisian Doom stack. Probably represents the majority, if not all, of their sacred production all game long, and a ton of their, what are these, Morgan Sorceresses? Yeah, these, I believe, are slow to recruit, definitely cap only, so this is probably almost everything, really, that Yis has. That comes from their capital, which is kind of the strength of the nation. So we're pretty much looking at Yis right here. And it's looking kind of scary. We definitely would not want to face that. That is a ton of Morvark Knights. In addition, could be supported by an absolute ton of air elementals. Plus, each of these 16 champions can be pretty nasty thugs. So we wish all the best to Pelagia, but especially since they're fighting 2 people, it's really probably more a question of time. Speaking of a question of time, Ariu attacking Agartha, just some Bakemono, classic. Anybody can use Bakemono to raid. I believe they're stealthy. Yeah, stealthy raiders, always really useful. Bakemono, super killy. So, they're up against some Bakemono. But significantly fewer, so Ariu manages to take that. And then we have Xibalba attacking Flagra. Looks like a raid. Nice, this fellow's been twice borned, so Stygian skin, okay, yeah, just gonna kinda sorta thug, but really it's like if he dies, that's pretty much all upside. So very nice, he does indeed die, but that's kind of the point of that raid. And then speaking of that underwater 2v1, Atlantis attacking Pelagia. This is an assault. Let's see if Pelagia has anything in here. Ooh, they definitely do. They have a monolith spamming out some battle fortune, in addition to a number of casters who have been given gems, some of them anyway. They do have some chaff here. Ichthyeids are not great, but they're not the worst troops. They're up against quite a lot. These Mother Guard, in addition to being sacred, are just pretty good troops. A little low on the attack density, but they make up for it by hitting really hard. Atlantis also has... Okay, these aren't Shadow Seers. It's just some Water Mages, it looks like. Yeah, quite a few Water Mages, in addition to probably cap-only mages. Pretty powerful, Astral and Water. Not a lot of gems running around here on these guys. Okay, some gems here. So yeah, let's take a look. Killing a monolith is going to be pretty tough. Let's see what other paths does the monolith have. Yep, standard monolith path. Somehow managed to get a berserker amulet that will eventually turn him into a werewolf, maybe? I'm not sure if that works on inanimates. But anyway, this is going to be fairly difficult to kill a monolith. Always fairly difficult. Let's see. Some sort of shark spell. The underwater equivalent of swarm here, a bunch of giant shrimp coming out, and the underwater, I forget, some sharks, school of sharks, sounds plausible. Always useful in an assault situation. Okay, yeah, so there must have been a lot of gems running around that I didn't catch, because here are all the water elementals. Looks like it was mostly living water that was cast, right? It was just creating more of the size 4 ones. And water elementals are actually probably a decent way to kill a monolith, though this monolith has made itself ethereal. Let's see, what else? Okay, shark attack. There, yeah, fair enough. That's the name of that spell, bringing in all the sharks. Looks like both sides cast shark attack, so lots of sharks. Grip of Winter coming from Pelagia, so a cold fatigue play, which is an interesting one. Could definitely work out. Fatigue is starting to stack up on these units, and, encumbrance is something of a problem, it looks like, for these Mother Guard. And no cold resistance from Atlantis, though. That's certainly something that they could cast, but yeah, I didn't actually realize that you could use fatigue plays underwater, the cold ones, but I guess it makes sense. Probably not the fire fatigue, but this is Dominion, so don't quote me on that. They're really struggling to break through the gap. That is one of the disadvantages. Those Mother Guard are size 3, so, it's a little harder for them to squeeze in. And a lot of these, ichthyos and etc. are lucky. Some sharks stacking up. Just kind of surprised that their morale is held. Let's see, what has the monolith been casting? Gonna click on him. Definitely should not have sped this up. Looks like mostly Panic, though has buffed himself up. Did charm a shark that swam too close. A little bit of Strength of Giants, Legions of Steel. Panic could become effective. I do think that, as Sacreds, it's not really going to work against the water elementals, and the Mother Guard, I think, have pretty good morale. So yeah, kind of a shame that he's just spamming, mostly Panic. So this could take a little while. Let's speed this up and check. Yeah, we still got a ways to go here. It does look like the front line is about to break, so this is looking like it might go against Pelagia here. Though there are a lot of units that are dead and or retreated, and especially if these little sharks stack up around them, they're going to really struggle to kill the monolith. Though I don't think the monolith, Syllable of Sleep, that's pretty effective. As well as, so there's a pretty good chance this battle times out. He's managing to tangle vines a lot of things, although as units retreat off and more water elementals manage to get in, at this point it's kind of a good thing that he's mostly, casting Panic and not killing units. Syllable of Sleep is not going to do anything against the water elementals, so this is a situation where some of the chaff is actually just causing problems for Atlantis, which is often how it goes, when you're up against some sort of super combatant like this. And of course, the challenge for Atlantis is that there were regular units that they get through as well. It's not like there was just a monolith here, so yeah, this is a difficult situation to avoid. And I do think it's going to time out. We got, 9 more rounds here. We'll go ahead and just let it finish out. So, here you have it. Monoliths. They can ruin your day, definitely. Underwater and above water. I haven't ever had my day ruined underwater by a monolith. So yeah, turn 90, Atlantis the attackers. All those water elementals are going to go away now. Everything else retreats. But on the balance, not the worst loss for Atlantis. Definitely a good hold by Pelagia, though still somewhat painful, right? They lose all the mages that they had there. They lose everything more or less but the monolith. And apparently one ichthyod managed to run away. But on Atlantis' side, right, they don't lose any mages. They do lose 18 of their sacreds, so that hurts a little bit. But otherwise, they can reconstitute this force and jump back on top. So still looking pretty rough here for Pelagia. But then again, 2v1s usually are. So here's our assault. Speaking of rough, right, we're only sending in the the Golem, so we don't have to worry about the fact that our army got really messed up. And there are a bunch of mages in here, though. Thankfully, they are Filigran mages, so they are cowardly. Some summons being brought in. Not a lot of chaff with a lot of mages, so that's definitely dangerous, but there definitely gems were handed out. This could have been a pretty nasty defense. May still be kind of nasty, right? Like our Golem might get sent home, but these guys are fairly slow, so probably not before he manages to bring in, well, yeah, right, the elementals are much faster, so he may not actually bring in any horrors, right, because his casting probably got interrupted. So let's see, let's go ahead and speed it up. But like a good number of those mages are probably going to retreat. Yeah, we just got sent home. So yeah, while we failed to capture the fortress, a little painful, we do eliminate the majority of the mages in here. So this will be a pretty easy storm for what's left of our army. And then we catch another battle between Man and Asphodel. This is an assault, another pretty serious force here. A lot of monks, which is good for banishment, and yeah, we definitely have a defense here, as well as a few global spells. Let's see, Light of the Northern Star, that's coming from Man's side, and then this is Natural Storm. Ooh, I don't know what that was. Natural Storm is also from Man. So we have Growing Fury from Asphodel's side, though I don't think that's going to matter for the majority of their undead. Perhaps just trying to prevent their mages from retreating off. And then Relief coming up from Man. So Man was expecting a fatigue play, which I think is a pretty reasonable assumption when you're going up against Asphodel. And indeed, there is a fatigue play, though it's coming from a Hydromancer. So that could be from Man, because I don't actually see a Hydromancer. Oh wait, no, there is a Hydromancer over here from Asphodel. So we'll see. Relief is definitely going to help, though it doesn't look like there's any cold resistance that's gone up, though it does look like Serpent's Blessing has gone up for Man. All right, we're going to try to let this play out nice and slow. Peter's not happy today. So a lot of banishment. Let's see, I'm still not sure what that is. Some sort of wipe, almost assuredly coming from Asphodel. And that could be very painful for Man. Hopefully they manage to get magic resistance up. Or anti-magic, that is, which will increase their magic resistance. We also see that Giant Sorcerer with Soul Vortex up. That's going to be a real pain in Man's behind. So I think there's another fellow who's maybe not coming up. Also, Howl has gone up for Asphodel. You know, always good to generate chaff during like a siege situation. Kind of surprised that there's no Howl from Man. I guess, you know, Relief is probably chewing up one of their major nature casters, but Man is a nation that has quite a bit of nature magic. Yeah, here's another fellow down here. One of these Carrion Centaurs, I think, or no, probably a Twice-Born Panic Apostate. So, yeah, these guys are going to be tough to kill, and Man's Sacreds might be able to do it, though, as I recall, they're mostly scales. They don't have too much of a bless. Yeah, we can see that like some of these guys are getting fatigued out from the grip of winter. And it does look like there might be a counter thug back here, but it kind of looks like he's asleep from the cold. So yeah, probably not enough anti-super combatant answers in Man's army. Probably lightning is like the easiest go-to. They're focused on air, well, I think more nature, but a significant amount of air. That said, Asphodel's thugs here probably have a lot of shock resistance. I'd be willing to bet, because I'm sure that this player, who is pretty good, is aware of the fact that Man can bring a lot of lightning to bear, and that's probably a lot of why we're not really seeing any lightning bolts being cast at them, because Man definitely brought plenty of mages. If we can take a look, like, yeah, there's still a lot of mages back here. You can see some of them are retreating, right? So there probably used to be more mages. This is another reason that like Howl is really nice. Okay, they charmed a wolf. I was like, wait, there's a wolf on Man's side. Because it just keeps the mages busy back here. So that might be another reason that we weren't really seeing a whole lot of lightning coming down. So even if Man manages to pull this out, which is not looking like they're going to, another guy back there probably just making skeletons. But yeah, even if Man wins this, it's going to be pretty painful. Yeah, so Man attacked Asphodel but was defeated. I'll have to look up what spell that was being cast. But this is a pretty brutal loss. I mean, at least, you lose 18 monks, that really hurts, but they are very cheap, same cost as a scout. And like a good number of their mages do survive, but yeah, I mean, that's over 20 mages lost, so that's pretty painful. In addition to losing quite a bit of their chaff, really the majority of their chaff. A lot of this isn't as important, though these released ones are fairly expensive in terms of gems. And like longbowmen, I think are actually, okay, no, they're just bog standards, so that's not too bad. I mean, it's still painful to lose like, 50 of them. The landless knights, though, somewhat expensive, and then also I think... yeah, not too many Knights of Avalon, actually, so that's not the worst thing. And then, 42 Wardens, that really hurts. Cap-only Sacreds. They do manage to get some kills, though, and some fairly significant ones. Asphodel actually loses a lot of mages here. Many of these guys were probably fairly heavily kitted, especially this Carrion Lord, who was probably responsible for, like, those wipe spells. Chaff-wise, Asphodel didn't have too much, so they don't lose too much. So while this is a really painful battle for Man, it's not without cost for Asphodel. Definitely good news for us, just so long as Asphodel doesn't end up gaining the upper hand. That would be bad, but as long as Man is busy, that's kind of a good thing for us, because we do share a border with them. So we have another fort assault here. We're just sending in a group of knights. We have some eagles back here guarding commanders, and they're just going to hang out. Unfortunately, these wall archer fellows, the rock throwers, are pretty nasty. And while our knights are fairly fast, okay, some eagles went in. That's probably unfortunate. That means potentially that a mage died or hopefully retreated. Sending in the eagles, actually, the eagles are just a little too valuable to risk like this, so I don't think that was intentional, but sending flyers against wall defenders is definitely nice, though this is an empty fort, but all this to say that probably going to be relatively painful for an empty fort. Okay, not too bad, only 3 Knights of the Chalice, but still. Anybody that's thrown rocks when they're up on the walls, that can actually get pretty painful. Let's see, we lose a scout, unfortunately, and a little bit of patrolling, and I'll catch you guys after the jump. All right, this is the situation and what we did about it. I guess first things first, let's talk the Phlegron War. So our army is going to storm here in Nazca. Like I said, I don't think there's a whole lot left in there. And then we're also going to push forward this army on top of this throne fortification. Does look like Phlegra has some, pretty significant forces remaining, though they are relatively chaffy. We're not too worried about all these Heelot warriors, but there are sages here and a tyrant. We're going to try to assassinate. We might bump into the tyrant, but the sages we might be able to assassinate. And, anytime you can mess with the communion, that is pretty useful. Depending on what spells these sages have and how many sages there are, this could be somewhat concerning. But if it's light on mages, then we don't need to worry about it too much. We would like to grab this throne because we can see that Ulm is relatively close by. They have cracked this palisade, so, whatever's here must have a decent amount of siege strength. It's not just a thug, and they're not too far off from this throne fortification. Otherwise, we are continuing to prepare for our war against Asphodel. Primarily this turn by bringing in another giant army here. And then we have another army that's building up in Arcocephaly, and then the majority of this is headed into Bandar. I do feel like we're pretty close to the point where we end our non-aggression pact with Asphodel, though I don't think it probably doesn't quite happen this turn. And I don't remember exactly what happens, but that massive loss that Man took is over on top of this throne fortification. They do luckily have a lot of other stuff on top, though a good amount of it is mercenaries. And I'm sure at this point, I was fairly concerned. We definitely did not want, Man to drop out of this war, or worst case scenario for Asphodel to actually, fight through this 2v1. Or I guess technically 3v1. Yeah, Vanheim is still out there and kicking and win it. That would be really bad. Though, as we can see, Ulm has managed to crack this fortification. So, this war is definitely a long way from over. But anytime someone takes a major loss like that, there's a tendency to rethink what you're doing. And sometimes that means changing the diplomatic situation. Otherwise, our god this turn is getting us more gold. We are keeping, enough fire gems so that we can recast Eternal Pyre if need be. And then research-wise, we're about to finish Alteration 9, which is pretty useful. Evocation 8 is also going to be really useful for us, primarily for Pillar of Fire. Enchantment 8 just gets us a bunch of battlefield-wide resistance spells, also pretty useful. And then the blood magic stuff I think is more tentative. With the Garnet Amazons, we have the ability to get into blood if we want, and Blood 7 is where you get Vampire Lords, which is a pretty good, late game strategy. So that's what's on the agenda, if something else more pressing doesn't come up first. Recruitment-wise, we're doing a little bit of recruitment down here on the border with Asphodel, primarily Flagellants. Like I've said, we don't really have too much of a front line. The majority of our recruitment is actually happening up here, like in Mikland, and then also this throne fortification that we took. We are still very concerned about Yis, and, it's kind of looking like this war with Pelagia. This has still got a little ways to go probably, but somewhat winding down. Really depends on what kind of agreement Atlantis and Yis made in terms of how much of this territory is going to go to Yis and how much of it's going to go to Atlantis. But they could be finished with this war relatively soon. And a lot of what we had in this area has, now moved out to fight against Phlegra. And of course, there is Xibalba, who has managed to battle back pretty effectively considering the position they were in. But we now own a fortification, that's in their cap circle. So, this was kind of always with the understanding that it was going to be a temporary situation. So it's only a matter of time before Xibalba's, they actually pretty much right now have nothing else to do. I guess technically, if this mountain pass is open, so they could raid this Phlegra province, but they've pretty much run out of things to do that aren't fighting us. Theoretically, they could go after Yis, but while Xibalba can go underwater, they're probably not going to be able to beat Yis underwater. Not that they're likely to be able to beat us right now on land, but probably still preferable than, trying to beat an underwater nation underwater. I think that more or less covers turn 64.